Okay, it says the meeting recording is in progress.
Perfect.
Do I close out of this recorder? Like, does it show up on your screen?
It's not showing up on our screen.
Oh, okay.
Hello, everyone. We would like to welcome you today to the webinar. This is being hosted by PACM, which is the Physical Activity Coalition of Manitoba. So we have two presenters, Mark Battle and Melinda Walden. Mark Battle is an early childhood educator instructor at Red River College in Winnipeg. That is all he wanted as an intro. So he is looking to kind of do the rest of the intro himself. Throughout the presentation, I think we'll learn a little bit more about him, right, Mark?
Oh, you'll learn a lot about me by the end of this.
Perfect. Mark's a lot of fun, so that's something that we are going to learn about him, or that if you haven't learned about him already, you will definitely learn about him. Melinda Walden has been an early childhood educator in the field for more than 15 years. She has been a frontline ECE in a variety of child care settings, including preschool, school age, nursery centers, with experience in infant and child care settings as well. Currently, Melinda is an ECE instructor at the Workplace program in Red River College. So that's here in Winnipeg. So what we're going to do is we are going to be muting all of the participants on the line except for Mark and Melinda. And we'll ask that if you are interested in asking them any questions, that you send them a chat, which is up in the top corner if you are not able to see it. And just send it directly to either everyone or to Mark and Melinda, and we will answer those a little bit later. Okay. And let's go.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for showing up on the online. This is all kind of weird. I'm not wearing any pants, so that's okay, because I poured water all over them this morning. We're going to talk about risks. We're going to talk about how do we create places of risk for kids. You know, what are the benefits of it? What are the types of risks that are available for kids? And we're going to talk about how do we make sure that we do it in a very, very safe way, and how we assess the risk. But first, we want to start with a great old quote. Without risk, there is no learning, by Carl Rogers. And Melinda's going to take it first, just what that sort of means from her perspective.
Everybody has their own kind of personal philosophy about risk, but for me, children need to explore and learn about their physical and social world through play. So I think this includes testing out their abilities to see what they're capable of doing, and from there, figuring out how they can take it to that next level. So risk is when you try out something new and have to face that unknown of what could happen when you try something new that is scary, and facing those fears of that unknown helps people to cope in frightening situations. And this actually is how we build resiliency. So unfortunately, we have entered this era of rules and safety, and this has limited the children's ability to develop to their full potential.
And potential is everything to me. About this, how this quote refers to me is every developmental milestone that a child goes through depends on risk. You think about a baby. When a baby is prepared to walk, he has to be prepared to fall. When they're prepared to talk, they have to be prepared to make funny sounds out of their mouths and people make fun of them. So every sort of milestone requires this element of risk. And it goes all the way through our life. Often people just talk about risk as being good for, you know, the health. I've noticed through the ParticipAction report, it's about the health. But to me, it's much bigger than that. It's your very character. Absolute very character is built there. When you're engaged in something risky, you notice there's a couple of questions that you end up answering. You answer something about, you know, this moment, this risky moment. Did it define your character? I'll bet you your risky play defined your character. In your risky play, you learned a valuable lesson. In your risky play, you learned how to be resilient. In your risky play, you learned how to make good judgments. And in that risky play, you managed to manage risky situations appropriately. So Carl Rogers is absolutely right. This is all contingent on risk, and all risk is at the forefront of everything that we learn in life. And then I worry about, I read the ParticipAction report, and they talk about the protection paradox that parents have got themselves into. Not just parents, but caregivers too. And we're overprotecting our kids to keep them safe, but yet we're doing them more harm. So we're doing more harm to their health, we're doing more harm to their well-being, and we're doing more harm to their general character, in which we're creating a whole group of people who are afraid of everything. And that is a big worry for me. So that's why we're here. We're going to talk about risk and how to deal with it honestly and openly. First, we're going to start with a little learning story, and this was a little project that Melinda and I did at a school.
Yeah, we did this at Lakewood Children's Center with a group of school-aged children, and it's called Rising Tide Lifts All Boats, a look at school-age risky play near dangerous places.
I know the joy of fishes in the river through my own joy as I go walking along the same river. When the snow melts on the prairies, it causes the rivers to rise high above their banks. Although the creeks become very dangerous places to play, they also give us great opportunities to float some boats. So, on a dreary in-service day, a group of school-aged children built a variety of boats to sail down a swollen Sturgeon Creek. Some made catchers by fastening a broom to the plastic bin with wire and tape. Isn't that amazing? You know, what I love about that picture is the kids are off to make boats, but there's a whole group of other kids making things to catch those boats. This way that everybody's boats can be rescued as they drift by. While the kids were working on their boats, Melinda and Mark did a safety assessment of the proposed boat launching site. After a walkabout, Melinda decided that this was the safest spot for the children to play near the water. Before the children left for the creek, Melinda gave them a safety talk about the creek, while Mark shared a folk tale about a monster that lives in the whirlpools and grabs children called Knock Knock. So Melinda did the good rules, and I like to scare the kids. You know, the old stories were all little cautionary tales to protect kids, so I like to bring them back, Melinda. After discussing the safety rules, the school-age kids walked to the creek. Stopping along the way to explore the depth of puddles. Arriving at the creek, Melinda went over the safety rules again. And if I can just say about that is, the reason why we did the rules again is because often kids, when they first hear the rules before they leave, they're so excited about leaving that they forget the rules by the time they get there. So we did a little reminder of those rules. We walked down to the creek and tested how slippery the snowy grass was. And once we felt safe, we walked to the edge of the creek and talked about the water. Although we couldn't put our feet in the big creek, we sure could in the smaller, safer one. We watched as some of us sailed their boats through a culvert. Others attached string to their boats for easier retrieval. And some built bridges. And once we finished exploring the smaller creek, we were ready for the big one. Look at those faces, everybody. We carefully took our places along the shore and sailed our boats down the creek. Melinda threw one of our boats in, but Aaron forgot to hold on to the string. The boat drifted towards the middle until help arrived. Using a bottle of water attached to a string, we were able to fish our boat back to the shore. We then went back to catching boats, watching the water flow by fast, and clanging the bridge rails with sticks before it was time to go. And on the way back, we explored more puddles and told our own versions of the Knock Knock tale. Finally arriving back to daycare with boots filled with water. A Manitoba right, the booter. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did. So throw off the bowline, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, and discover. So what happened on that little learning story? You know, usually out here on the prairies, people don't want to take the kids close to the moving water because it is so dangerous. But yeah, that's the place where they want to play. So how do we take them to the sides of the river without them falling in? Without them falling in, but also be able to explore that sort of exuberance around being near that.
So, risky play is defined by Ellen Sandsetter as an exciting and exhilarating type of play that comes from the possibility of injury. So it's that injury that causes that excitement and that a little bit of fear that comes when you're trying something new or something that you're not sure about.
So here's what we're going to focus on. First, we're going to start with the problem around risk, and that's what I'm going to cover. And then Melinda's going to talk about the 6 categories of risky play, the kinds of risky play that children want to play right now. And they are playing, you know, often behind your back. About the benefits of that risky play, and also how do we do that in such a way that we can assess it and make sure it's done safely. So first, the problem. Well, there's a few problems. The one that a few that I want to focus on starts with our own neighborhoods. You know, we live in neighborhoods where it used to be where there were signs of children all through your neighborhood. We used to see kids, they would put little ramps outside of their house with their bicycles. Kids used to be outside. Kids used to be in our neighborhood. We used to watch out for kids. And now what's happening is that the neighborhoods are all gated off. People don't even have their kids outside, out in the front. They keep them in the back. And that way kids aren't exchanging some of their ideas and some of that riskier playthings that they want to sort of teach the young ones or teach the older ones and teach a couple people some new tricks. Another problem is the TV and the news. You know, they can highlight something that happens in the Philippines, and then all of a sudden every parent in North America thinks that's going to happen to their child. Bad stuff happens, and that's a terrible thing. But we cannot sort of change the rules for all kinds of play just because some bad thing happened to one kid far away. We have to do things a little bit, well, with common sense. It's through the news that we start hearing things like tag being banned or ball games being banned on playgrounds, and then that starts to spread to all kinds of other places. Just because a parent got hit with a ball in Toronto doesn't mean that we have to have the same rules here in Winnipeg. We are the problem. Everybody listening right now, look in the mirror. You're the problem. Yes, you're good-natured, and yes, you hope for the best of your children. But what ends up happening is what they had said in that report about the protection paradox. We're overprotecting them, and that's starting to cost us. If I can add in about that too, this might be a bit controversial, but often my feeling is that a lot of people, especially adults, are childists. I call that a prejudice. It's a prejudice towards children. They commit acts of childism, a prejudice, because what they do is adults are afraid of kids. And I think adults are afraid of the uncertainty that goes around children. And so the way that adults deal with that uncertainty is they like to put kids into boxes, into little categories. They like to think kids are vulnerable, or they like to think kids are stupid and they need information. Or they think kids are angels or devils or oh so cute. Well, that's just a prejudice. And when a kid does one thing that sort of cements that prejudice you have about them, you close it down for them. So, for example, you have a kid climb a tree and he falls out of the tree. Well, automatically that tree's banned for everybody. Well, that's not fair. That's just a prejudice that we're applying to everybody. You want to say something about the Adam?
Yeah. And then from this, you get judgment. So even the adults who want their children to take these risks or to have the childhood that they had, they're feeling that they're being judged by other people. And when I worked in a child care center, before I had children, I would always get people saying, you would never do this if you had your own child. You wouldn't let your own child be put into that kind of risk. And now that I do have my child and I am letting him take the appropriate risk, I have people saying, well, you wouldn't do that with other people's children. So it doesn't matter where you come from, a judgment is always there. And so we really need to get past the judgment of what other people think and do what's best for the children.
Yeah, just to let you know, Melinda's son has a black eye right now, and his arm is in a cast. So I don't know if I go by her. That's just me. The other problem is the artificial lives we seem to be giving kids. The TV sets, the video games. I get worried because I notice that kids are getting a bit of exhilaration through those video games, but it's not real. And they're not learning the consequences. And they're not really feeling the real jump about what it's like to really ride your bicycle over a ramp. So basically what's happening is they're creating and constructing artificial childhoods, which is not much that you can go by with that. And finally, what we put in our playgrounds for children, for them to be able to share some of that risky play. Well, we try to engineer it out of it. And that's a typical playground structure you see in playgrounds with risk managed out of it. But my biggest fear about these kinds of playgrounds is that kids will find their own risk on something like this. That scares me. I'm afraid that kids are going to use something in such a way that they don't know how to use it. It's not designed for that way. And that's why we really try to encourage that we have more adventure playgrounds and nature-based programs, because these playgrounds here, they create boredom, and boredom is really, really dangerous for children. So that's the problem. And there's many, many other problems and why people are sort of getting in the way of children's risky play. I will say, you know, when we talk about the adults, that's probably the biggest thing, is because we as adults, we've forgotten. You know, we've forgotten about the glory of risk. You know, when you're a child, you have to go through hundreds of developmental little tasks, you know, from the age from 0 to 10. And you think about how many developmental tasks does a 51-year-old man have to go through? I don't have many developmental tasks to go through, which means that I don't have a lot of risk in my life. I have to joke, especially at my age, you know, the only time I go to the hospital is for a colonoscopy. It's not because I fell off the roof anymore. So I have forgotten about that glory of risk. And I have forgotten that it is much more than putting yourself into harm's way, that there's valuable lessons there, lifelong lessons there that are essential, as I said, to the character of who you are, but your overall health and well-being. So now Melinda's going to talk about the 6 kinds of risky play that those kids want to play right now in your program.
So one of the categories is playing with great heights. So when you're playing with great heights, the risk is that danger of injury from falling. You might see children climbing in all forms, whether it's trees, even the monkey bars, going on top of the monkey bars, jumping from these heights, hanging, dangling from heights, balancing from these heights. I actually had some children from a school-age center that I was working with. They climbed on top of the monkey bars, and they said, "Melinda, we're going to jump off of this." And I could tell that they were a little bit scared, and they were up there for 20 minutes talking about how they were going to jump off the monkey bars. That feeling that they got about, that exhilaration they got about thinking about jumping, is one of the most important things. And one of, all of a sudden, a little kindergarten child went up to the top and jumped right off, and they looked at her and said, "Oh, no, now we have to do this." Which was really funny, because then one of them jumped off, and the other one said, "Melinda, can you turn around for a second?" So I turned around, and I could hear her climbing down the monkey bars, and she said, "Okay, you can turn around." I turned back, and she said, "I jumped." And I said, "All right. I'm glad that you felt safe enough to do what you did." And so you could just tell from that they already can assess what they feel safe doing and what they don't feel safe doing. And through climbing and jumping off of things, they're going to learn that, and they're going to understand that feeling they get, those butterflies or that fire in the belly that you get when you don't feel safe enough to do something yet. And that's an important skill that they need to understand.
Can I mention something about the butterflies? I'll be jumping in with jokes and all kinds of stuff every now and then. But with the butterflies, like, that's a physiological thing that happens to your body. So when your body is ready for a risk, it's already starting to shut down. It's shutting down your stomach because it has to hone the other skills that are in your body. So those butterflies going off shows that we are naturally adept at dealing with risk. That's telling our body, I am now ready for what's going to be happening. And the other thing, if I can say about great heights, you know, children, they typically have 2 great big fears. And one of the big fears that they have is falling out of something high. So that's liberating for us. So you've got this child who wants to climb high, but yet at the same thing, they're really, really terrified of it, which then makes them safe, because they're honing all their skills to make sure that they don't fall.
And this is when children are a little bit older, but what about infants? And this is Jasper. This is actually my son at 13 months old. And he's climbing up the slide. And one of the rules that I always hear is that you go up the stairs, down the slide. And I think we're getting further away from this, but there's so much physical development that happens when children are able to climb up the slide. And the first time Jasper ever climbed the slide was the day that he learned to walk. And it's because I gave him that opportunity to climb when he wanted to climb. But I also know that he can't assess his environment because he's an infant. So infants and toddlers, they can't assess what's going on. So you have to do that assessment for them. If they fall, is it going to be okay? Is it okay to fall at this time, or is it okay to fall later? And so me assessing that, saying, okay, he can do this, and I'm here to make sure that he can do it safely, was a big piece of his learning and working on his physical development. And as we all know, the infants and toddlers are very egocentric. So the first thing that they're learning is just how to move their bodies and what they can do with their bodies. So they're not really looking at the things around them. So it's us that need to assess that. That being said, falling is essential for learning. So even though we're letting them climb, sometimes you have to fall to understand the consequences of your fall. So this is Jasper again, and I'll tell you the story of this picture. We got this type car for Christmas, and we decided not to put the wheels on it because he likes to climb, so we let him climb it in our living room. And at first he would go over top of it and then climb down it on the other side, and then he constantly was doing it over and over again, and you could tell that he got so good at it he got bored. That the next step was the way that he's standing right now on the thing, on the truck. And then all of a sudden, one day he stood up, not holding on, and he looked at me and he smiled, and you could tell he was really excited about it, and then he said, jump, and I said, so my butterflies are going, and I'm a little bit scared. And I was thinking in that moment, he has a lot of self-confidence about this, but that's not the safest thing for him to do because, you know, infants and toddlers can't really jump. And so I was thinking, and I said, you know, the only thing that he needs to do is he needs to fall, because him learning or having that scare of falling is what's going to teach him. And a few days later, he stood up and he rolled right off of it. Luckily, I assessed the area and made sure that the area was safe so that when he fell, it wasn't going to be on something to hurt him. And he didn't get hurt, but it scared him. And the next time he climbed on top, he stood exactly like that. He let go for 2 seconds and went back down, and he held on. And I could tell that he had those butterflies and he understood that risk because he went through that and he had that fall. So without falling, you don't learn how to assess risk or manage that risk. And even infants can do that if you give them that chance to fall.
That's why their bums are so big. They're built for falling.
Yep. Another category is play with high speed. So that's uncontrolled speed and pace that can lead to collision with something or someone. It could be bicycling in high speed, sledging in the winter, sliding, running uncontrollably. When I was a child, I did a lot of snowmobiling at my uncle's farm, and I remember I was just practicing my speed, and in an open field it was good, I can go really fast, but my uncle jumps on the back and tells me to go through the bush, and through the bush there's a really small path. So when I was going through the small path, he kept going, go faster, but I was going really slow because I didn't know if I could control the speed as well as maneuvering through the small path. Well, my uncle kept going, go faster, until finally I went faster and I crashed into a tree. Well, what I learned from that is that I had that feeling, but I didn't listen to that feeling of not going faster. I kind of gave into that peer pressure of going faster. So now, when someone tells me to do something that I don't feel comfortable with, I try and say no. I say no because I know what that feeling is, and I know what could possibly happen if I don't listen to what I'm feeling.
Can I mention one of the other fear that children have, aside from falling out from a height, is losing control while going too fast. You know, again, this is very, very liberating. You can sort of see why, you know, we think there's a prejudice involved in here, why adults don't allow the kids to do these things, because you're already naturally afraid of losing control going high speed. So why don't I let you go high speed so that you can find your own comfort level in there. We always talk about, I love watching the boys, it's usually boys, but girls too, on top of the hill with their bicycles, and they want to go as fast as they can, and they've got all that bravado. They're talking about how fast they're going to go, their molecules are going to set fire, you know, that's how fast they're going to go. And when they go down that hill, they end up dragging their foot and slowing that down. You know, and that just shows that risk mechanism that kids naturally have. Yeah. Right? They automatically have. But again, if you've got prejudicial views of kids, you're not going to be willing to see that. You're not going to be willing to see kids sort of prove themselves right, which I think is such a disservice that we do.
I agree. And if we're looking at infants, here's Jasper again. He's my little infant toddler example. As soon as he could crawl, he was trying to go as fast as he possibly could, and then when he started walking, he was walking as fast as he possibly could until he started running. But while he was running, infants and toddlers tend to run into walls or other things because they're just trying to figure out how to move their body as fast as they can without bumping into things. But in order to learn that, you kind of have to collide and bump into things to learn how to move your body in appropriate ways without getting hurt.
And I would argue that a toddler is a dangerous object.
That's true.
Just a toddler alone and their biting is a dangerous object.
Collision with something or someone teaches us many things. How to look at what they could slide into. So if this is a good picture, you could maybe not see it very well, but there was a really tiny hill, and the children in this picture, they wanted to go down the hill, but do people bowling. They wanted to bump into people. And I said, okay, well, how fast does it go down? Have you assessed this? What are the people at the bottom going to do if they don't feel safe? And we talked about it, and they said, we'll jump out of the way if we feel like it's coming down too fast. And I said, all right. And the people said, we'll try and slow down if we feel like we're going too fast. And they assessed that risk, and they decided to take it. And they collided with each other, and they had fun, and no one got hurt. But they had to really think about how they were going to do that and think about how they were going to go down the hill without hurting anybody else, as well as understanding their speed.
If I can just mention something again about really looking at kids honestly, I work a lot in child care programs, and I'm always amazed by, 3-year-olds can run through a room and they can avoid hitting anybody. They have this, they keep their hands out front, they do a quick stop and turn about, and they miss. Sometimes there's some collisions. So I'm always overwhelmed by how adept they are at avoiding collisions.
That's true. And one of the rules that are, especially in child care centers, is the no running rule, and it's not really teaching them how to maneuver and how to use their bodies while they're running, and especially inside, because inside is when you're going to maneuver and not bump into things. The next category is play near dangerous elements, so where you can fall into or from something. So lake, sea, fire pit, cliff. We showed you the story of the creek, which that includes that as well. I'm going to get Mark to explain this picture.
Oh, this was actually, what's neat about this picture, if you notice the girl in the front, her name is Sarah, and actually how this all got started was Sarah has cerebral palsy, and her therapist came in and said we had to put masking tape down on the floor, like make a little path with masking tape, and then have Sarah follow that. And so I thought it was a crazy idea, but I'm not a therapist, so I thought, okay, I better do it. And so I'm putting the tape down on the floor, and in comes Sarah, and she asked, what's that? And I said, well, I'm making a little tape path for you so you can work on your walking skills. And she said, that's stupid, and she tore it up and threw it in the garbage. So therapy was gone. We go outside, and the children have decided to take the planks of boards that we had, the loose parts that we have. They took the planks of boards and they laid them against a tire. You can see it on the bottom of the picture. They got chairs from inside the daycare, laid them across that, and they called it a dangerous obstacle course because you step on one thing, it goes flying, right? And you'll go falling off. And as soon as Sarah saw all the kids stick this up, she was adamant that she was going to have a turn on that. And so it took her about 20 minutes with assistance, holding hands and then not holding hands as much. And then I took this picture of her completing the entire obstacle course with everybody. And then we had to set this all back up for when her mother came in to pick her up because she wanted to show her mom. There's a dignity, There's a dignity to this kind of a risk. We see ourselves differently. Sarah, this is a very meaningful picture for me because Sarah sees herself differently. She doesn't see herself as the kid with cerebral palsy, the kid that has this sort of funny way of walking. She was the kid that could do the obstacle course just like everybody else. And the reason why I also like this picture is because often with kids with disabilities, we will not give them the same experiences with risk. I'll tell a funny, bad, terrible, funny, bad story, and if you hate it, then you can get out of the chat, all right, and you can come back later. That'll be all right. But I think kids with disabilities really need the same access to risk as anybody else. They're not special. They're not special by any means. They're just a child, and everybody has needs. So let's just all get over that. So one time I'm taking this little girl, another Sarah. She was just in a wheelchair, and she had profound mobility issues. So I would take these kids to the Creeklands back in Ajax, Ontario, and it's a high hill that goes down to the creek. And so, of course, all the kids want to go running down the hill, and they're running down the hill, and they're having a great time and falling. And Sarah's just vibrating, you know, and I go, you want to go down this hill? And she just nods. So I take her wheelchair, and I take her halfway down the hill, and I let her go, and off she goes flying down the hill. And she's just screaming, like this is beautiful, like a positive scream. Very, very happy scream. And I get down there, well done. Well, she won one more turn, so I thought, okay, so I push her up to the top, and I decided not to let her go at the halfway point. I'd let her go at the beginning point. So I got her a little push, and off she went. And she started going flying, and then she experienced something called a speed wobble, in which the front wheels were sort of wobbling. And I forgot, of course, to strap her in because I'm that kind of guy. And her wheelchair got a speed wobble. She went flying out of the wheelchair, landed right on her head, got a really good little cut on her head. And everybody's getting all upset, right? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, I start clapping. And I go, well done, Sarah. It was an epic crash. And everybody goes, oh, my, epic crash. And we put a big bandage on her head. And everybody went, oh, what are you going to say to the mom? And they're going to say, well, Sarah got in an accident. I just strap her in, you know, because I'm a bit of a papa. Sarah got in an accident, just like a lot of the other kids get in accidents here every now and then. And sure enough, her mom came to pick her up, and there's a big bandage on her head. And she was a little bit taken back from that. But once we explained what happened, she actually started crying because this is what she expected her kid to have. Right? Her kid has the same right to those stories that Milka has that I almost died when. She has those same rights. So risk is a very inclusionary process for kids.
Even infants need to have time around different things. So time your water to understand like the qualities of water, even around fires and things like that. Obviously we have to be there and we have to watch that. This is just a picture of Jasper walking across a bench, and he actually walks across it, and there is a chance of him falling, but him practicing it gives him those skills so that when he is older and he's maybe on a cliff or anything like that, he has that physical ability to be able to do it safely. So falling from a dangerous element or into one teaches us many different things. So I'm not saying, yeah, we're going to fall into a river, but if you're falling or slipping almost into a river, or you're balancing on this ice like you see in this picture, and you're falling from it, it's teaching you how to balance. It's teaching you all these different things. But it also teaches you about the different concepts of the dangerous elements. So fire is hot, and I'm sure all of you have burned yourself sometime, and that helps you when you're around something that's hot not to touch it. Well, children need that same experience. Everybody's going to burn themselves once, and I'm not saying a big burn, but maybe a little burn to understand the concept of hot and what's dangerous. And same with around water, understanding the concept of water. Does this water have current or undercurrent? Because you need to know what kind of water is safe and what kind of water is not safe. So really getting into that concept, which you don't necessarily have as an infant, but as they get older, they can start learning that concept. And they actually say that children who are around water and who've experienced water are less likely to drown than people who've never really been around water.
But also, again, going back to that Lake Woods project with the kids being, so, you know, taking them to Sturgeon Creek, showing them about snowy grass, that's slippery. Showing them what the dangers are, because we care about these kids 24/7.
Yeah.
And when you just say no to risk inside of a daycare center or a program that you're running, you're not teaching that child how to be safe for himself or when he's out in the community. We know those kids are going to be out by Sturgeon Creek outside the daycare center. So we want them to be smart and tell their friends, you go down slow to the creek because of the slippery grass. But that's a lesson you learn with us. And that's why if you don't talk about risk within your programs, when are they going to learn on how to do these things safely?
Yeah. Another category is play with harmful tools, and we also added objects, especially when you're talking with infants, because you're not necessarily going to give an infant a saw or an axe, right? Well, maybe Mark might, I don't know. So this can lead to injuries or wounds. So it includes axes, saws, knives, hammers, ropes. And I'll get you to explain that.
Yeah, I like ropes with kids, and kids like ropes. And especially this picture we have here is my work on Haida Gwaii, and it's a fishing community. So ropes are in the ditches. Ropes are everywhere. You have to have ropes in the daycare, for heaven's sakes. And this is just kids. You give kids rope, you give kids boards, they just want to suspend it from the climber. I don't know why. There's got to be a good reason. Now, with this picture, it's hard to tell, but with this picture, it's a desegregated program, so there's toddlers out there too with preschool kids. And so when children are doing something like this, I won't say no. I'll try to create a place where we problem solve. So the kids tie off the rope and they're suspending the chunks of wood, and I go over and say, listen, we've got some little kids out here now. We've got little toddlers out here. What are you going to do to make sure that you can do this activity safe? And of course, you know, you say it to a group of preschool boys, they go, we'll police it. And so what they did is they surrounded the climber. You can see a kid in the background jumping down. They surrounded the climber. They policed it. They didn't allow any toddlers to come through. Was it pretty? No, it wasn't pretty at all. But they did stop toddlers from coming in, and they did sort of take the initiative to protect friends, but also to protect themselves and create a safe environment for this kind of play, which again is a very powerful lesson.
Yes. With infants, this is Jasper with some dangerous objects that we don't normally let young children do. So in the first picture, you see Jasper with pea gravel. Well, actually, pea gravel, he probably could eat it and swallow it and it would be fine. But I'm just thinking of small items. We don't always let infants use small items because it's a choking hazard. And I'm not saying just go put it out in your environment and let them choke on it. No, I'm saying do we take it out while we're there and teach them about the small items and what to do with the small items rather than putting it in their mouth. And I think we need to make sure that they have some of the opportunities, because if we do turn our back and they're constantly putting things in their mouth, especially small things, then at least we've tried to teach them not to put it into their mouth. The second one is a fork, and this is at 12 months old. He was using a fork, and I've actually gone to a lot of centers who say they don't let their infants use forks, and I thought that was weird because the only thing that he could possibly do is maybe poke himself with it or someone else. That's actually a very big danger because they're egocentric. So they can possibly learn not to poke themselves, but other people.
And they can't go to jail. They're too young. They know that.
But he learned really quickly that if he poked his face, it hurts. He's not going to do it anymore, and that you need to get it into your mouth. So he learned how to use a fork with purpose. Same with sticks. That's another rule that I see a lot at a lot of centers is that no sticks. Put the sticks down. You can hurt somebody with that. Well, at an infant's age, they need to learn how to use these objects without hurting themselves. That's the first step. So how do you use these objects without hurting themselves, whether it's choking, poking themselves, or hitting themselves with it? Now, they can't assess outside of their body, so the other kids are a little bit at risk at this point, so that's where we're there to help assess and making sure that they're using it safe enough that other children aren't getting hurt. But small injuries and wounds help you to understand the importance on how to use objects and tools safely. And I bet you all can relate to this picture on the side here because I think everybody's hit their fingers with a hammer. But you need to have these small injuries and wounds. And I'm not saying the big saws or the chainsaw ones, but you need to learn how to use these tools safely and how to use it with purpose so that you're using it properly. Another category of risky play is play where children can disappear or get lost. Children are without supervision and where there are no fences, for example, in the woods. I know that this is a picture here of a child care center in Winnipeg. There is a fence behind there, but this is a place where children can go to be by themselves. They don't necessarily need to be watched at all times. And I think we need to create more spaces like this for children to go. Here's another one of Jasper exploring the forest. Even like little places, this is a teepee that was put up in one of the forests by our house. Just letting him go in there by himself where we don't necessarily have to watch him, and him being by himself and exploring being all alone. And same with the second picture here, that's the Assiniboine Park. Actually, Mark helps
the playground.
The playground. And there's a fence all the way around it, but there's woods that surround the whole thing. So you can basically go into the woods and explore by yourself without necessarily leaving the playground, and you can be by yourself. You're a little bit closer to Jasper because he's still learning, but it's a great place to explore.
And we had just released the wolves in the Assiniboine Park, so that's a good idea.
Yeah. And I bet you can all relate to this picture. The feeling of being lost teaches us many things, and I've gotten lost when I was a child in a clothing store because I was hiding in the clothing rack, so I bet you all can relate to that. And there's many things that you learn from being lost. I had to figure out, how was I going to find my mom? I was like all by myself. What do I do? Do I go and talk to the clerk? Do I just search around and look for her? Who do I ask? Who do I talk to? There was a lot of problem solving that was going on, but that feeling makes you really scared and nervous. But you have to figure out, you have to cope, you have to figure out how you're going to get out of this safely. So I thought this was a pretty good picture because I think a lot of people can relate to that. The last category is rough and tumble play. So this is where children can harm each other. It could be wrestling, fighting, chasing, fencing with sticks. And I think we see a lot of this in our centers.
And it is just such a developmentally appropriate way, especially for our young males, to learn limits and expectations from each other. You know, I was in an after-school boys and girls club in Toronto when I was a little kid. I was 6. I don't remember anything. I don't remember anything. I don't remember the activity. I don't remember the people. But I have never forgotten when I took down the big guy. You know, to this day, I can still remember how it felt leaving that program going, I took down the big guy. Now, chances are he let me, but I don't care. That really built who I was. That gave me confidence. That gave me stuff. It made me feel like I was a part of something, you know, that sort of brotherhood.
These are videos, but I'm going to just explain the pictures because we don't have a lot of time. But this was my nursery school class, and what I had noticed that we had a group of 3-year-olds. And the 2 children in the first picture, they were wrestling in the room. I was going throughout the room, and the other kids started trying to wrestle each other. And so I said, okay, what are we going to do about this? Because they need to wrestle. They're telling me they need to wrestle. So, and I had done this with older kids, but not necessarily 3-year-olds. So I got them together. We set up a little area, and I said, okay, we're going to wrestle, and here are some rules. Like, what are some rules that we could add to this? So they said, oh, no punching, no kicking. Watch the head and neck. We went through a whole bunch of rules, and we let them wrestle. And the first 2 kids, they started wrestling, and it was going on for a really long time, and then all of a sudden I said, okay, that's enough, let's stop, and they didn't want to stop. They wanted to continue. So we actually had to go in there and break them up, and they were having fun. It wasn't that they were doing it because they were aggressive or fighting, it was because they were having so much fun. Well, we decided to do a second round, and I said, okay, I'm adding a new rule to this. And this rule is a stop rule. So if you feel uncomfortable or you're put into a move that you don't like, you need to say stop. And if someone says stop, you need to stop right away. And the children said, okay, we're going to do this. And they started wrestling. And they wrestled for a good few minutes, and all of a sudden one of the kids was in a move, and he said, stop. And the other child, who was 3 years old, rolled off the other child. And it was right away. They stood up. They separated, and then they were ready to go back into it. Well, right there, the child who said stop learned an important lesson of his own limits. He didn't feel comfortable, and he needed to say stop, and he did. The other child who rolled off the other child after hearing stop, he actually learned self-control. Because the first time they didn't want to separate, the second time he actually stopped. So you're actually, by wrestling, you're learning valuable lessons on how not to be aggressive. In the second photo, you can't really see, but there's 2 children who are going to fight, but they actually have language difficulties. So one language is an additional language, and the other one there's a language delay. And what we do know about children with language difficulties is that they have a lot of aggression. And so when we were letting them wrestle, it was more hitting, punching, things like that. But their intent behind it was to wrestle. It wasn't to hurt each other. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. A few rough and tumble games that you can play. There's like some wrestling things that you can do with kids. So there's the hummingbird, is when you go back to back with a kid and they connect their arms and then they flip each other over the back. So fun little games that you can do that is considered rough and tumble. Steamrollers, when 2 children, they hug each other laying on the ground and they roll across the ground. So there's fun games that you can do. Chasing is also part of rough and tumble games. So that almost gotcha, infants love the almost gotcha, where they're running towards you and you almost get them, but they escape, they get away. And that's part of that rough and tumble and that feeling of almost getting caught. There's Escape from Alcatraz, and if anybody's dealt with any preschoolers, then you would have definitely done this game. It's when they put you into jail and then you escape and they have to try and arrest you and put you back in jail. Another really good game is under play fighting is just pillow fights. I don't think we do a lot of pillow fights, and even young children like Jasper, he loved pillow fights, and I think it wasn't necessarily the pillow hitting him, but the wind that comes when you like get hit by the pillow. And you can do some jousting games, so like jousting with pool noodles, letting children do things like that to practice their play fighting. And this is all from The Art of Roughhousing, Good Old-Fashioned Horseplay and Why Every Kid Needs It by Anthony Bettis and Lawrence Cohen. And it's a really great book, and it has a whole bunch of different games you can do with roughhousing. So I thought.
Well, the sword fighting is really big right now because of Star Wars, right? So all the kids are going to want to be able to play a bit of that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you do need to know is that we always ban it because we're saying that it's promoting aggression and violence, but you actually really need to know the difference between aggression versus the rough and tumble play. And it's all about that intent. So aggression includes being mean-spirited, frowning, angry words and feelings. There's actually domination, so one person wants to win all the time. There's no give and take. There's threats and humiliation that's happening, and it's real hitting, kicking, and fighting. And then after they separate and they don't want to play with each other because they're mad at each other. That's what aggression is. But play, it's different. It's voluntary. They're smiling and laughter. They're having fun. There's give and take. So if someone's winning, they know if they want to keep this play going, they have to give a little so that the other person can win. Otherwise, the game's over. They leave the play still friends. There's falling down and hitting without actually hurting. And it's good-natured and it's sociable. So if you know the difference between aggression and play, when children are playing, you let them continue doing that. But if it's aggression, that's when we need to stop it.
Can I just add in there, the other thing you notice, it's very, very positive when it's the smallest kid after the biggest kid. And that seems to be more, 98% of these are it's the smallest kid searching out the biggest one. That's when you know you're onto something. When we were out in Lakewoods, we also witnessed some wrestling going on with the kids. And something that surprised me, because I'm an old man, where the boys were wrestling the girls. And so anyways, this boy wrestles this girl, sends her flying off the picnic table, really good little wrestle match. And we come inside, and I sat down with the fella, and I said, I come from a different place. We never wrestled girls. What's the rule? And he said, hey, if she's the same size or bigger, it's fair game. It's amazing for a variety of different perspectives, not just for rough and tumble play, but just that was very cool.
And you also asked me, someone younger wanted to play, and what would you do? And he said, I would let him win. I would give it in a that he would win. When it's turned aggressive, which usually happens, what you do is stop playing. So you stop playing and children stop having fun. When they show anger, fear, and fighting, which can happen in play if they become aggressive. But if you are going to stop it, use it as a moment to teach for limits that they need to say not feeling comfortable. After so when someone to stop because this can stay to keep this to solve this turn habit, how can we solve the problem? And control that their habit things you have. But I have to try again. You don't strict, don't say no. I mean, to let them be how they feel.
And we want to practice.
Yes.
A risky is where you really have a risk. So when you do that, the kid gets hurt, and that's it. That's not anymore. Well, that's just prejudice. Not every kid is going to get hurt. Not every kid is going to make that mistake. But every kid, every now and then is going to make a mistake. That's why you're a child.
So in the photos that I showed, the two children who had difficulties, it was interesting watching. It looked like they were being aggressive because they were punching each other. They didn't know their own strength, but they were both having fun. And so that was the difference. It was actually play because they were was to hurt each other. It was to continue to play. And I think sometimes we don't know that difference. So every single time one of the children would go and punch the other child, we'd stop them and say, hey, that's really hard. Someone would get hurt if you do it that hard. How else can you do it? And he'd go back and he did it a little lighter the next time. And eventually he learns his own strength. And that's a huge piece of learning to control that aggression or those impulses that you have when you're learning how to wrestle or how to interact with another person. Harming someone or harmed by someone during rough and play teaches us many things. So we talked about that self-control. We also talked about our own limits and how far is too far. And we talked about our own strengths. But it also teaches us social cues. Because if you're wrestling with someone and you see that they're really uncomfortable, you're looking at their face, you're in close proximity, and you understand if, you know what, you've gone too far or you haven't gone too far. So you're really learning to read what other people are doing.
All right, now the benefits as we're getting up to the hour. There's many reasons to risk, but probably the best thing from where I come from is always you learn something new at the end of it. Every little risky endeavor that we've engaged in, we've learned a brand new lesson about something specifically, you know, a new skill or something, or we've learned probably a big lesson about who we are, which I think is the best part about risk. We really are defined by that. And you get increased resilience. You learn the world doesn't fall apart. You know, even if you have the risk that goes bad and you get yourself hurt and you cry for 2 minutes and then you realize, oh, that only hurt for 2 minutes. You know, I have no evidence and I have no research to back me up, but I have noticed something. We've been removing the risk from our children's lives for about 20 years. And I've noticed that teaching in the college system, you know, when I first started out, maybe 2 people with a test anxiety. Now we're looking at 50 to 60% of my class would have a test anxiety. You know, and if you climbed a tree, gone down a hill as fast as you can, played with a knife, you know, by a creek while wrestling your best friend alone in the woods, you're not going to be afraid of any test. You know, so we're making our children fearful of everything because we're making the undangerous absolutely dangerous to them. You get an increased self-esteem. You see yourself completely different. As I said earlier, you know, about the wrestling that kid, that boosted my self-esteem in a way that my parents could never. You know, it's through these actions that you're really building that self-esteem. I make judgments about risk, and to this day, you know, it's funny because I do a lot of risky things with kids, but I hate taking them for walks along a road. I make judgments about that because I know what's really, really scary. Cars are scarier than any tree is ever going to be there. But most importantly is when I engage in something risky, I do it in a safe way, which is the great thing about risk. You learn how to do things safely. And that bottom part is I get to manage my own risk. I make sure that I set myself up so that I can still do fun things without getting hurt. So physically, I learn how to negotiate all the hazards that are in my environment. I develop a new skill on being able to get through those environments. I learn how to use tools. I learn how to use equipment safely. I know how to use those things purposefully. And I also develop the coordination and the control of my own body when I do a risky play, because I'm forced to, you know, because I don't want to get hurt. With risk, there's social and moral risks within those. You know, through risky play with my friends, you know, or when kids are engaging in risky play with their friends, they're understanding the expectations and the rules within this different group. So what I can do with this group is different than what I can do with this group, which I think is fantastic. Again, that's being able to negotiate with different kinds of people through risk. You develop reasoning skills because a lot of times I love it when kids are arguing about a risky thing, right? And they will argue to make it safer. Right, and they're using reasoning skills to do that. And my most favorite thing about the moral benefits and the social benefits of risk is you negotiate with others, and that's where you truly learn to say no. That's when you say no to your friends. And you know what? You're going to have to say no to your friends at some point in your life. Ellen Sandstetter has shown that the researchers has proven that if you remove the risk from the lives of children, it comes back later on. You can't remove risk. So what ends up happening is they're engaged in riskier lifestyles when they're teenagers. High rates of teenage pregnancy, juvenile delinquency. I know we're sounding like one of those anti-marijuana ads right now, but the effects of removing risk are just absolutely profound for those kids. I'd always tell people, I want my kid, you know, at 3, racing around on his bicycle, crashing on his bicycle at 3. I don't want him doing it when he's 18 in my car. And finally, the other great benefit is intellectually when we have risk. When we risk, we try out new ideas. We try out something I didn't think I could do, and I have a go. I give it a go. I'm not afraid of trying something new. I'm not afraid of solving a problem. I'm not afraid of being resourceful and being really, really creative. You know, the cure for cancer is going to come from kids at risk. It's not going to come from kids who have had these really protected lives. So risk is not only good for your health and well-being, but it's your very essence of who you are as a human being, for heaven's sake. And the last thing that we need to focus on is assessing and managing risk.
So there's some really good questions that you can ask yourself if you're trying to assess risk for children, or if you're trying to get children to assess the risk for themselves. So what are the hazards? Actually, the difference between a hazard and a risk is a hazard is something you don't see, whereas a risk is something that you see and you choose that you're going to do. So a hazard, if there's a hazard, you're going to look for those hazards. Is there something that you don't see that could possibly harm you if you're going to do this? And if you're talking about infants, everything might be a hazard because they don't see anything. So it's us assessing those hazards for them. Who is at risk? So if we're dealing with infants, everybody is at risk besides them, right? Or, you know what, if they're hanging things from ropes and there's little kids around, it could be other people who are at risk if they're about to do something. So you need to ask yourself, who's at risk if I do this? And making sure children are able to see what could happen. What is the likelihood of injury or harm? So can I get hurt doing this, or will I might get a scrape, or will I get a broken arm? You need to really think about if you're possibly going to get injured or get hurt.
Can I join on that?
Yes,
one? That to me, that one is the big one, because people will say that you will get harmed, that you will have an injury. We have to remove the roots from the trees because it will trip the children, and it will be a tripping hazard. That's not a hazard. You know, so that one, it has to be very, very real and pragmatic, because so many people will pretend that these injuries or harm really exist when it really, really doesn't. So you got to be really honest with that question. Is this really going to cause an injury or harm?
And that makes sense, right? So if we're teaching children how to look for hazards and how to assess those risks, then, you know, tree roots are not a big deal. And what are those consequences of the injury and harm? Is it that broken arm we talked about? Is it a cut? Are you willing to take that plunge so that you might get a little bit of a cut? That might be okay for you. And what are the control measures? So what are we going to do to make sure that we control our environment in a way that children are still getting the risks that they need, but also that they're doing it in a safe way so that we know that they're not going to get seriously injured or harmed? So I was in a workshop, and one of them said, you know, I work with toddlers, and they always, whenever we get to the cement stairs, they want to jump from these cement stairs. And I said, okay, first of all, is that safe? And he said, no. And I said, no, that's not safe. But the children are telling you something. They're telling you that they need to jump, and they want to jump off stuff and take those risks. So maybe you can set up something that is safe for them to jump from, but maybe not the cement stairs. So we're assessing the risk for the children, but also looking at those control measures. How can we give them the risk that they need, but in a safe way? When we went to the Creek with the School Age program, we sent out a letter to all the parents to explain the Risky Play project that we were doing. And we also got them to sign to be part of this, and we also got them to come and we did a meeting. So this was the beginning of our meeting, and we had the parents join us as well. And we talked about the 6 categories of risky play and what they were. And the parents were really interesting. They started going back to their own childhoods and talking about the risks they had and what they want their children to do.
Can I jump in on that? I think that's a really important piece, especially if you are dealing with parents. We have to deal with parents. And parents always come up as the reason why people don't do risk, which I think is also really unfair. But what I've noticed about parents is, of course, their intentions are really good. Nobody wants their child to get hurt. We don't want your children to get hurt. And so it's really important for us to have that conversation. And what was the risk about your life? You know, and Melinda's absolutely right. There were parents who were having like a little competition on who did the riskiest thing. And then we talked about, you know, what did you gain from that? And then they made their own leap to the fact that kids don't do that anymore, and that's actually a disservice. I will argue that once you have that conversation with parents, it changes them. It turns them around fast, you know, to see what the benefits are of risk if they begin with themselves.
Well, and if you think about risk is all about trust, right? We have to trust the children to take those risks, We have to trust ourselves to make sure that we're assessing the risk and making sure that, you know, this is the right thing to do. We also have to, the parents have to trust us with their children. So if we're doing this with other people's children, we need them to have trust in us that we know what we're talking about and we know what we're doing, we know how to assess risk, and we know how to teach how we assess and manage and get children to manage their own risk. And so when we do that, parents feel a little bit more confident in our abilities to let their children take risks when they're not around them, and maybe give them a little bit more confidence to let their children take risks in front of them as well. So it's all about that education and building trust. And this was a note that was outside the door explaining to parents the clothing and stuff they needed to bring so that we could go to the creek.
And then we had a parent who wasn't a big fan of this because the river was swelling and they were sort of going, well, are you still going out? And so we still talked. Yeah. It's a nice opportunity for us to have a conversation, engage in discourse with a parent about, you know, why are we doing what we're doing, how we do it in a safe way, and what's your kid go and get out of this? And I think every parent deserves that. And once we had that conversation, the kid came along. Yeah. We lost them in the creek. It all turned out bad, but, you know.
And here's some pictures that you've seen probably in the story that we told. But it was interesting watching the children go there, and you could see that at the beginning they went to the smaller water source because they were, I think they were a little bit scared of the water. Yeah. And then eventually they started feeling a little bit more comfortable and they went closer to the creek. And then eventually they understood their environment, that they felt comfortable enough to that they could run across, not into the creek, but along the creek and understand kind of the terrain around it and really use their bodies to figure out what was going on in their environment.
And the other thing important, if you notice, we had them splash around in water, we had them splash around in the small creek. We know that if you take kids to water, they're going to want to splash around. If we didn't do that, then there would have been the urge to put your feet in the more dangerous creek. So, you know what, we're fine with kids getting booters. Go into that other smaller creek, get your feet wet, get all that out, so that when you come down to the bigger, more dangerous creek, you know how to do this in a safe way, and there'll be no urge to get them in the creek. So we're going to conclude with a beautiful little quote. Courageous risks are life-giving. They help you grow, make you brave, and better than you think you are. And that's the whole point about risk, is it makes you think that you're better than you think you are. And I often think that that's our job also as educators, is to help a child paint a different picture of himself, different than what his parents have for him, different than what his friends have for them. And risk is one of those paintbrushes that a kid can do to really define who they are. So we're going to throw it over to the questions and opportunities. So I'm just going to take it off this screen so I can see what our little chat. So I guess I can just leave it like that. No, I'm going here. All right. I can't. Okay, there we go. I think I got this. Let's see if we have any questions, Melinda.
Hopefully we don't go out of it.
Okay, do we have any questions?
Stephanie, are you there?
Of course we're here. We have been laughing along with you, but we were all muted. Oh, now you have me on video.
Yes.
So I have a group of people here in the office. I'm going to turn it so that you can actually see the people who are here. So we have Kylo and Nancy. And any of you have any questions? I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I do have one question, actually. My question is, when you make it okay for children to take risks, does it take some of the thrill out of it? when every time they ask you, can I do this, and you say, sure, you can do that.
I think if they master something, then yes, it kind of does, because then they're on to the next challenge. So we always say, like, when people are going up the slide or it's something more challenging. So yeah, eventually it's not a risk anymore if they've mastered it.
Yeah, and I would say, that I want to get rid of that sort of element of the mystery or the danger of the risk. I want to get rid of that so that you can actually just really do the risk itself, and then again gain all those benefits from it. You do bring up a good point. That's probably the best thing about risk is it's a little cheeky. You get to do something that maybe people didn't allow, but the world has changed now so much that we have so many adults with kids. It's not like when we were kids where we didn't have an adult around, right? And so now adults are around. We have to have that sort of balance where, okay, I'm going to allow you to do this risk. This is how we're going to do it. I think the excitement of the risk is still there. We just removed some of that sort of black market piece of it, which I think is dangerous.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah, we were in there. I was in there. There's nothing in there.
So, like, giving more and more risk activities, that become like a risk junkie that gets more and more risky, or I don't know.
One question here in the office is, when you give them more risky opportunities, do they then crave more risk? Do they become risk junkies?
I have never experienced that. We take the risk that is essential to their development. So it will just be the cravings, their developmental cravings will be wanting the urge to risk. Kids don't want to risk all day long. They just, if it seems to make sense, that's when it happens. And as I said, a lot of times it's development, that I've noticed is driving that. So I don't think kids are going to be risk junkies or anything like that. And if they do, the development's just going to get better. But it's kids responding to something. So once they deal with that little stimuli, they're not out searching for a new stimuli. It's almost like I'm gonna sort of revel in this. So I've never seen that myself. It's just there are some kids who are riskier than other kids. There's some kids who really like that jump. But what I've noticed in my experience, it's linked so hard to development that it's all based upon whatever developmental urges they're having. And you know what? Some kids risk more one week than another week. It's like a hunger. It's an urge for something.
And it's really just a way to get over fears, right? Because that exhilaration and fear that you have when you're about to take a risk, if you have too much fear about what you're going to do, you're not going to take that risk. But if that exhilaration kind of takes over, then you're more willing to try it. And by facing these fears, you're actually getting rid of anxieties and phobias that you would gain as an adult. So I don't know if it makes people more riskier, but it does make them overcome those anxiety and phobias as adults.
A lot of what you talked about were in child care centers where you've got a ratio of instructors to the kids that are in care there. You take that to a school setting where your kids are out on the playground and you've got one or two teachers who are out there with them. How do they deal with that? Because, as we talked about, some schools have been allowed kids to have balls and taking away all these elements of play for the kids, but they don't have the same ratio of supervision either to try to monitor them. So how do they kind of work on that sort of balance?
Well, I think that is part of trusting kids, because I think if we're giving them those that foundation of understanding, even teaching them how to wrestle, if they're doing it behind my back when I'm not there, at least I've given them kind of a foundation on how to do that. Or if they're going to be by water by themselves, at least I've given them the understanding of that there's undercurrent and the dangers of it, so that when they're put in positions where there's not a lot of supervision, they have that idea of what to do. And I think the school division or schools are a little bit different than maybe a child care center, but you still have that
It will also cause you to change how you're doing the outdoor time too. In order to facilitate risk on the playground in the school systems, you're going to have to look at what are the duties and responsibilities of those people out there now. Are they going to be defined as play leaders, where they're going to go around and help kids not just risky play, but any kind of play, participate in play? Are there going to be mentors, risk mentors? Maybe they do what other schools have done with Peaceosaurus, you know, on having kids being conflict mediators. That maybe there's adults training children to be sort of risk monitors. Now I'm getting terrified. but why can't we empower leadership on the playground for other people to help people through risk in a safe way?
There's actually a school in New Zealand called Swanson School, and their outside time is all risky play. There's no rules a part of anything. So they do, like, I don't know, tackle football, things like that. They have no rules at all in their outside play. Look them up on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, because they do amazing things. Their school does amazing things, and they let their children take those risks. And they're finding that actually I don't think they have a lot of injuries because the children's physical development is so good. I actually talked to a director at an infant center, and they said, hey, we took out all the rules in our infant center, and our incident reports went down because their physical development went up. And so there's actually less injuries happening because children's physical development is better.
Did that answer that question for you?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, well, it looks like we are kind of wrapping up here with questions. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I learned some things to do. I learned some things to kind of think about, and I think that there'll be lots of opportunities. This webinar will be available if you would like to re-watch it. It will be available up on the PACM website, up on the Manitoba Fitness Council website, and also for sharing kind of through our network. So on behalf of the participants in PACM, I would like to thank you, Mark and Melinda, for the presentation today. Do you have any final thoughts?
You know what, all this stuff, when we're talking about risk, it's all a risk for everybody. It's a risk for the adults who are creating programs. It's a risk for the children involved, and the benefits are all the same. So when I create places where kids can take a chance, I like the word taking a chance better than risk because it has such a negative connotation. But when I create a place where kids are taking a chance and taking risks, that fills my bucket. You know, it's scary. It's all chancy, but boy, when I walk away, I feel like an educator. So risk is scary for everybody involved, and don't forget that. Just because Melinda and I do all the risk stuff, we both hate looking at kids climbing trees. Like we try to do it in such a safe way, but also understand that this is risky for us too. And I think kids are worth it. I think their development's worth it. I think their self-esteem's worth it. I think their character is worth it. So I will take that risk as an adult to try to make a place so that they can take a risk too.
And I think we should just come from a place where instead of saying no, just say, how can we do this and how can we do it safely so that you get your needs met and that we all feel that we're accomplishing something.
And that's a learning democracy right there.
Well, thank you so much. This has been very informative, and we will talk soon.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're not recording anymore, so now you can give us the real story.
This kid scares us. We never do risk. How was that, Stephanie? Was it what you were hoping for?
Yeah, it was great. The only challenge, honestly, was on my end. So I actually had to set up another computer so I could go in and mute some people in the background because as people were arriving, there was a little bit of interference just in the first little bit. But I think we got it figured out for the second 3/4 of the webinar. So it's good. So I'm going to download it onto YouTube. I'm just, yeah, so I have to go through some pieces. But you said you're okay with having it a public file?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be great. And we'll be able to see the link?
So yeah, so it will be, I'm going to upload it onto YouTube, onto the Manitoba Fitness Council channel or PACM channel. PACM doesn't have a channel, but Manitoba Fitness Council does, and at least then it kind of gets in with our stuff, so it's always findable. And so I'll send you that link as soon as I have it up and running. But are there specific words you would like it tagged with? Because that's the next piece, is I have to go in and tag it with a whole bunch of words. So if you would like to send me a little bit of a list of words that you think would be great to have it tagged as, just from your perspective, and then we'll do the same with ours and then make sure that people can find it.
Sounds perfect. Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay?
And you were a pleasure. You were a pleasure to work with.
Oh, thank you. I didn't tell you this, but last week when we were doing our trial run, I was at home and I was sick, so I was actually wearing pajamas on the bottom and dress clothes on the top. So.
I knew it. I knew it.
Anyway, so so risky. I couldn't stand up because then you would know I was wearing pajamas.
We should have done that next time as well.
Okay, next time, pajamas. Okay,
I got a great stand-up song. All right, take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I think that.